This season, the Memphis Grizzlies had a pretty good season. As going into the 2020-2021 season, most people didn't have Memphis making the playoffs. They had teams like the Pelicans, Warriors, and I even saw some people saying the Timberwolves would make it over them. But Memphis surprised a lot of people when they made the postseason, and you have to remember they were doing this without their second best player in Jaren Jackson Jr. for nearly the entire season. And in the first round of the playoffs, they faced the number 1 seed Utah Jazz, and although they lost in 5 games, they showed that they were just a few pieces from being a team that could get to that next level. They showed a lot of heart. But nonetheless, for them now, it's the off season. So today's video, I'm going to be giving 4 things that I think the Memphis Grizzlies need to do this off season. Before you get into the video, I ask you to drop a like on this video as it does help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel if you want weekly NBA content and touch my goal of 1,500 subscribers. Comment on this video, start a conversation with me as I do respond to all of my comments, and play that intro. First thing the Memphis Grizzlies need to do this offseason is extend their former 4th overall pick in Jaren Jackson Jr. Because I believe this offseason he will be able to get that extension. And earlier on in his career, Jackson looked like a player who was going to be a for sure all-star level player. He looked like a player who could be a defensive player of the year candidate in his prime. But then he got a serious injury in the bubble, which led him to sit out most of this season. But ever since that injury, he just hasn't been the same and he hasn't been able to regain his form. But I still think they should offer him an extension, because before that injury he was playing absolutely fantastic and looking like a future all-star. He's just perfect for this team, and he's perfect for the modern NBA due to him being a very good ball handler for his position, as well as him being a solid three-pointer, and he's a fantastic defender, especially off the ball. He just has to stop fouling, but he is really good at guarding centers. He's not the best post defender, but he's good at like helping out on defense, and he's really good at switching on the perimeter players, which is something that a center needs in the modern NBA. But I think he plays power forward position right now, but I think eventually when he gets stronger and gets more knowledge, he's going to be a center. He also needs to improve on his rebounding because he's pretty atrocious at that. And to be honest, I think Memphis should give him a contract that's worth around 20 to 25 million a year. He probably will get more than that because that's how the NBA is right now, but I still think they have to re-sign him. You also have to remember that Memphis is a very small market team. They might be the smallest market in the NBA, and they're definitely one of the 3 smallest markets, meaning that it's rare for them to get any type of free agent that's on an all-star level. So they're going to have to get their all-stars and really good players from the draft or from trades. And I don't think they should leave it up to chance that Jackson could possibly leave this team or anything like that, because I still think he has all-star potential, and I think he's Memphis' second best player when he's healthy, so they definitely have to give him an extension. They can't lose him. Second thing the Memphis Grizzlies need to do this offseason is add more veterans to this team. Because when the Grizzlies made the playoffs, I believe they were like the youngest team in the NBA to do that or something like that. But just know the Grizzlies are a really young team. And if we're being honest, it's very impressive that they made the playoffs this year. And it shows me that one day they could possibly be one of the better teams in the NBA. Because a lot of their key players haven't even hit their full potential yet due to their age. But then this team also needs to add some more veterans, because it's nice to have a team that's not young, but you also need some guys who can like be great leaders and stuff like that and know what to do in certain situations and provide wisdom and things like that. I don't think you can be a truly like title contender without that. Some guys in my opinion they should look into is maybe Lou Williams, who's obviously a veteran. Danny Green's a good veteran. Patty Mills is a very experienced veteran. Trevor Ariza is a very experienced veteran. Paul Millsap is a very experienced veteran, and he could maybe mentor Jaren Jackson Jr. Avery Bradley has some experience, and so does Wesley Matthews. And so much other free agents are veterans that Memphis could easily afford, and they're actually guys who I think could help their team out as well. So I think the Grizzlies need to sign 2 or 3 of those guys, and I think it could help their team out drastically. It's not going to make them title contenders or anything like that, but it definitely will make them a better team. The third thing the Memphis Grizzlies need to do this offseason is decide whether or not Jonas Valanciunas is going to be their long-term center. Because in the 2022 offseason, which is the offseason after next season, Valanciunas will be an unrestricted free agent, and he's actually a very good player. You could argue he's a top 10 center in the NBA right now. He's probably one of the more underrated players in the NBA, and I think he's clearly the most underrated player on this Memphis roster, because on some nights he's actually their best player, and he drastically helps their team. And he's just coming off a career season, so they need to decide whether or not they want to keep him, because if he's not their long-term center, I think it would be a good time to trade him while while his value is at its highest, and teams always give up more for a trade if you for an expiring contract if you give him up during the offseason rather than at the trade deadline. But in my personal opinion, I think the Grizzlies should keep Jonas Valanciunas and maybe try extending his contract in the trade deadline or something like that, or whenever the extension deadline is. Because it was pretty clear that Valanciunas was arguably their most impactful player. Because whenever he would go to the bench, Memphis would drastically get worse. And it's not like he's old or anything. He's not a young player like most of the team, but I believe he's 20 or 29 years old right now. So that means he probably has another 3 to 5 years being good. So in my opinion, I think they should keep him on the roster for the long run, unless they could get a good trade package in return for him. But then again, maybe he wouldn't even want to be on this team for the long run. I don't know, but I think that's a question that might have to be answered in this year's offseason. The fourth thing the Memphis Grizzlies need to do this offseason is add more shooting to their roster. Because Memphis was one of the 10 best defenses in the NBA, which is very impressive seeing as they're a young team. And a lot of the credit has to go to their coach in Taylor Jenkins, who's probably the most underrated coach in the NBA. This whole Memphis team as a whole is just underrated, for being honest. And I'm not even a Memphis fan. And they have a pretty solid defenders on their team. They don't have any amazing ones, but just a bunch of solid, decent guys. But where their struggle comes from is the offensive side of the floor, because they have some decent scorers like John Morant, Dillon Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr, and Jonas Valanciunas. And although they have multiple guys who averaged over 10 points per game this season, which I think is actually really good, since it means that anyone on this team can go off on any given night, which makes them way harder to defend and game plan for. But the thing with this team is that they don't have a single dead-eye or fantastic shooter. If they could just get one or two of those guys, I genuinely think it would drastically help their team out. I'm not saying they need someone like Joe Harris or something, but maybe just a few more guys who can shoot the ball very well. Some guys who come to mind who are available in this year's free agency is maybe Otto Porter Jr., who was one of the best shooters in the NBA before. He just needs to stay healthy. Maybe Tim Hardaway Jr., who's a streaky but a really good three-point shooter who could do really well getting set up by John Morant. Maybe they could go for an older JJ Redick, because although JJ is a liability on defense at this point, Memphis is already a really good defense and they could probably hide him better than most teams. Maybe they could look at getting Kelly Olynyk, who was killing it on the Rockets, but he might be a little bit too much money for them to sign in the offseason. We'll have to see, but he could really shoot the ball. Maybe they could look at getting a veteran who could space the floor like Tony Snell, who had the highest three-point percentage in the NBA, or maybe Doug McDermott, who's one of the more underrated catch-and-shoot three-point shooters in the whole NBA. And obviously there's more shooters, but I'm not going to name every single one of them. But trust me, this year's NBA free agency, and literally every NBA free agency in the past, always has some guys who can shoot the ball at a good level, and Memphis definitely has the money to do it. So I think they should pick up 1, 2, or maybe even 3 of these guys, because I think it would drastically help their team out. To conclude the video, I think Memphis is in a really good spot, and they have one of the more bright futures in the NBA. They might have the most underrated bright future. This team just underrated. I don't know how much times I had to say it, but I don't think they should make any moves, because I kind of like how their roster is with them being really young. And even if they didn't make any moves, they wouldn't be stuck in place, since their roster is so young, and they have 5 to 7 players who are just so young and haven't reached their full potential yet. So they are going to keep improving whether or not they make any moves. But I feel like some of the moves that I said in this video could really help them out right now. But in the long run, I'm not really worried about it. I think they're a really good team. All they need is Jaren Jackson Jr. to get back to his old self, and they'll be valid. Anyways, guys, that's it for the video. Let me know whether or not you think the Grizzlies are going to make the playoffs next year. Drop a like on this video to help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel if you want weekly NBA content, and touch my goal of 1,500 subscribers. Subscribe to my channel if you want daily NBA content, and touch my goal of 1,500 subscribers. Comment on this video, start a conversation with me, as I do respond to all of my comments, and I'm out.